Well, hello
Hey, well,
again.
welcome everybody.
Welcome.
Oh,
No, that's fine to Long Story Short, Stories in Social Media. For you fabulous alumni of the Nonprofit Storytelling Conference. And today, our special guest speaker is Beth Ann Locke, who a lot of you met or know of. And she is going to be teaching you all things social media and how to tell better stories on those platforms today. So if you could just go to the next slide. So I just wanted to go over a few housekeeping items before Beth takes it away. For those of you that are maybe new to GoToWebinar, I wanted to introduce you to your panel. Over there on your right, that orange button, that arrow, you can open and close it. And just FYI, if you are listening to this with your mic and speakers over your computer, that's excellent. Sometimes if it gets choppy, it's just because of your internet connection. So if you find you're having a hard time, just go ahead and click on the telephone button, and then you'll get the telephone call and information if you want to make that transition. The other thing is if you want to submit your questions, Beth will be looking at that throughout the webinar, and we also have time at the end for Q&A. Go ahead and write in that questions box. So right now, why don't you go ahead and try it, get into that questions box, and tell us where you are calling in from, or where you're at right now, so we can see where you guys are. And so making sure you know how to use that. And then if you are tweeting, go ahead and use NPStoryConf. That's the same hashtag we use for the conference. If you're tweeting and you want to share some of Beth's great, awesome nuggets. So as you can see, Beth, they're from all over. Look at this, which is great.
that would be good.
Yeah.
I can't see where
Oh,
they're
you
from.
can.
Oh,
Okay,
yeah.
so Denver, Amarillo, Texas, Salem, Oregon, Winnipeg, Seattle, and Sherry, of course, one of our hostesses with the mostesses, says Chicago, home of the 2016 Storytelling Conference. So welcome, everybody. If you have questions, you can put them in there, like I said. And let me go ahead and introduce Beth. So next slide. Can't wait for you to see this fab picture of one of my best friends ever. So this is Beth Ann. Now you guys are like, oh yes, Beth Ann, I remember her. So Beth Ann is a donor obsessed in the best way possible and tireless fan of connecting donors to their dreams. That's a really good statement about who Beth is. She's a fundraiser that's been doing this for over 20 years. She's raised over $30 million, and I think that's probably a low estimate, to be honest. And she really believes that relationships are the key to all we do and what makes fundraising awesome. She co-hosts a really great program called the Gratitude Camp with me, where she helps
Yay.
fundraisers learn to better share appreciation and gratitude with their donors. And she's also just really passionate about strengthening this profession, especially for women. She, with her friend Rory Green, she's the co-founder of a really cool movement called Misrupt, and it's all about how to bring women fundraisers together to talk about and advance the goal of really disrupting the status quo in this sector. It's really cool. She's a native of Seattle. She now lives in Vancouver, BC, and she's the director of advancement for the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences at Simon Fraser University. So Beth, welcome and take it away.
Thanks, guys. Hey, everyone. I'm really excited to speak with you today because I really enjoy social. Um, so first of all, I was going to have Shannon do a poll so I could get a sense of how advanced everybody is. But if you maybe want to just mention in the chat whether you're sort of at the crawling stage, if you're new, if you think that you're at the if you think that you're at the walking stage or the flying stage. If you want to type that in, maybe Shannon can tell me what we're doing. So what we'll cover today, and I'll try to give as much information for people who are starting out and additional information for people who are a little more advanced. But I want to talk you through the most popular platforms and then helping think about which ones might be better for your organization, how we build community across social, how we take the stories that we already learned to write, how those compelling stories can be made into shorter content that we can share and drive back to the websites where we will be, of course, hoping that we'll move them into donors. How we use social media for thought leadership. If you haven't done that before, I've worked with an organization where we did that and kind of instead of building community around fun and volunteer and donors, we did it around being the respected leaders in our sector. Tips for small shops. I know there's some people that are just sort of doing all the comms or a bunch of the fundraising or just everything themselves. Tips for how you can maximize being social, and then at the end we'll talk about measurement.
So the poll results, thank you everyone for going in. It looks like we're pretty split on the baby stage and adult stage, but 50% feel like they're in the teenager stage, kind of feel like they're walking, but 30% baby and 20% adult.
Excellent. Okay, so the first thing I want to tell you guys is you've got this. I know that you, whenever you're starting something new, sometimes we feel a little hesitant. Are we doing it right? One thing that's great about social is most people start by sort of lurking, listening, watching, and then you move and become more comfortable in it. So you already know how to tell stories, and that's the most important part of social. You've already learned with us, and I'm sure a lot of you are already creating super great content that's compelling, that has great images. Now we're just getting ready to share or share in a better way. As you know, social lets us have better connection and different connection than we will do with things like meetings, events, newsletters. This allows us to tap into new audiences or lets people access the information that we have at their own speed. And it also lets nonprofits be more human. I've worked at a number of nonprofits, and I have certainly seen some that want to be the whole, you know, letters have to start with, on behalf of, et cetera, et cetera. We want to have a human face around what we're doing. So one thing I want to do is just keep some perspective. Although social is huge and growing, when thinking about how it is with nonprofits, we still are getting a lot of fundraising through direct mail. 47% of nonprofits say that a donation is their pinnacle of engagement, and that's because in the end we're all driving toward that. And I know Tom Ahern talked to us a lot about that. We're not just writing great stories for story's sake, we're doing it because we want to build revenue, because we want to get the job done that our nonprofit is working on. Email interactions provide about 5 to 15% of total nonprofit revenue, and direct mail is really strong. But social media is a great way to meet new people. It's also where our younger generations are working and living. My daughter just doesn't do email at all, and I guess she takes the letters I write her. But you know, that's where people are, and often our nonprofits are the last to make the changes that we need to stay up with what's happening. So social media is a great addition, but it's not a silver bullet to fixing everything. So social really thrives on visual, and you probably already know this yourself. We're seeing the rise of platforms like Tumblr, Instagram. Really everything is getting more and more visual. Videos are getting a lot of traction. I couldn't believe this, 60 hours of video uploaded onto YouTube each minute. And visuals definitely, when we measure engagement, inspire higher interaction, higher sharing, and higher engagement with our different audiences. So think about that as you're telling your stories. How am I going to augment my story? How am I going to find a good visual for it? And how can I, if I don't have a lot of images, and some of us who've worked at small nonprofits don't have a whole stable full of photographers working for us. We have ourselves, and maybe every once in a while somebody does pro bono work. How do we use those to their best advantage by cropping, by repurposing images to help tell our stories? And then one thing I want to make sure you're doing is when you have set upon what you're going to use as your social platform or social platforms, be sure that on your website and in other places you are showing which share buttons you are using. So I'm just going to go over some of the most popular platforms. So Facebook, as you know, now everybody and his uncle is on Facebook. It used to be the domain of college students, and now 72% of the internet users are using it, but growth is slowing. Twitter has 23% of internet users, but it's extremely social. It's fast-paced. It gets a lot of breaking news and information, so it's very popular, especially with younger people who use it also to communicate. LinkedIn has steady use. The users are highly educated. They also have high income levels. I wrote high income users. That's funny. Some of the income generators are users. And then I also mentioned here YouTube. So your nonprofit, if it doesn't already have a YouTube channel, I would suggest you at least settle on the name you want to have and save that if you can find that that will be a unique for yours, because it's an excellent place to load all sorts of talks, shorter videos. I've used it to put private thank you videos that we then sent to people, so they needed a link behind because it had their names in it. Obviously, Pinterest has been growing a lot, although the demographics are very female and a little younger, which isn't bad, but just knowing what you're working with. Snapchat has been the fastest growing social media platform to date, and a lot of businesses are using that, and I think some nonprofits, they're changing around how you're able to push out content on that. Instagram, well, it's almost only visual. Sometimes there's very little post on it. Very, very popular. It's being used by all sorts of people, and we have a lot of nonprofits that are using that as well to their advantage. Tumblr, and then there's a lot of live streaming options out there. One I've used quite a bit is Periscope. Facebook has started a live streaming, and you can use that for events that are happening. You can use it to show people having their needs met. There's just so much going on. So, but if you don't have a lot of bandwidth and if you don't have a lot of resources, the important thing is that you find out what you can do and do well. So here's just a little comparison so you can see. This is from the Pew Research. It's information looking at users on social platforms from 2012 to 2014. And it shows you the percentage of adult internet users. So how do you choose? If you don't already have a platform, you need to think about what can we do, what's our best to work with our audience. I'm hoping you've already done some audience development to look at who your users, who your donors, who's interacting with what you're doing. And then think about what matches well with platforms that we've just discussed. So something like 98% of nonprofits have a Facebook page. So I'd say there are a ton of nonprofits on it. You want to make sure that you're having quality posts on what you do and that you have enough time to interact with that. So one of the very sad things that happened when I was doing a social media audit for Ronald McDonald House of Western Washington is we were going through what they were doing, and they had allocated, I think it was 30 minutes a week to be on social media, and oh my gosh, they did a lot of scheduled posting, but as we were looking through, they had such a sweet note from somebody who as a child had been at Ronald McDonald House. She posted how much she loved it, and the post had just sat there for about 3 weeks. Nobody had noticed it, and that just does not feel good for people who are posting, especially when they're posting positive information. So when you're thinking about what you can do, make sure you can stay up with the socialness of it, and that's a little bit more challenging on Twitter than, say, Facebook. Social media should augment all the work that you're doing, and let's take a look. So if you're in that crawling stage that some of you are, you know, what I did when we were starting, especially at College Success Foundation, or when we were trying to restart I was helping the comms people at the Parkinson's Society of BC. We just watched places that we liked. What are they doing? How are they using it? And then we started trying to schedule some things out that fit with what we do. We at Parkinson's were mostly using the Facebook platform, which we used to tell people about, you know, events. It was a lot of asking, are you going to be on the walkathon? Are you going to go to this event? But there wasn't a lot of interaction. At College Success Foundation, we used Twitter. We did have a Facebook page, but it was a bit of a dog's breakfast, unfortunately. So our new communications guy came in and said, let's, you know, be very focused on how we work with Twitter. Then we weren't using as many images. We were using a lot of links, but now you really want to use as many images as you possibly can while keeping them authentic. It's great when we see those very beautiful setup photos, but I would be more interested in you using photos that you can take or somebody that you've hired to take that look like things are happening right at your organization. Certainly, that's much better than stock. Your next stage is going to be sharing content, starting to post, retweeting, reprinting, regramming. Sometimes you feel more comfortable doing that. And then when you get a little bit more advanced, you're going to want to start adding content and curating content. I want you to remember also that we want to link people back many times to either our website or to a story on our website or to a campaign on the website, because that's where you're going to be driving a lot of the total information about what you're doing at your nonprofit if they don't already know. So let's get started. Here's how I suggest you might get started on Facebook if you haven't done so, or if you're rebooting the account. Create your account. Find the best banner and avatar images that you possibly can that show the work you're doing, the place you're doing it, the people being served, one of those things. You really want to have the kind of images that Tom Ahern and Jeff Brooks talked about that they're clear, people looking at you and feel like they're inclusive. You really want to start thinking, how can I interact, how can I chit-chat with people and be very authentic with that. It's one reason that you really need to have someone that can be on social media at least once or twice a day. I would say at the very least at the beginning of the day and the end of the day to be able to respond to people who've posted, commented, or asked questions. On Facebook, you can now add a donate button, and I think that that's an excellent idea. It gives you another avenue, and it keeps people on the platform and give people reasons to visit. Even at Parkinson's, sometimes when we used animals like dogs to illustrate things, or as therapy pets, those really got shared and liked so much. It's crazy. And then one thing that you notice on Facebook, you can have haters, you can have people that make a negative comment. This is going to happen, and with new communications, we can't control everything that happens, but you should have a policy and a plan on how to respond to those. So I brought up Best Friends Animal Society. I thought they'd done a good job. They have images that they change sort of seasonally. You can see that they have the Donate Now. One of the other things I really liked was this they included this Stay in Touch. Stay in Touch allows them to put in their first and last name, their email address, and their zip code, or presumably their postal code, so that you can add them to a list and keep in touch with them. It's another great way when people are real fans of what you're doing to be able to pull them into other parts of what you're doing, put them on a list, or have a special list that's just for your Facebook group, your Facebook fans, friends. So I loved that. In their About section, you have a chance of putting in a lot of information, including about where you are. If you're a place that people come to, like a United Way or a Head Start program, or I don't know, maybe I'm trying to think of what other people we're doing at nonprofit. If you put that address in, then people can check in, and that's another way to increase engagement. So, getting started on Twitter. If you want to be interactive, if you have the bandwidth to do this, I really enjoy Twitter. There's a lot of conversations that can happen. It's easy to get caught up in current events in that if you're mindful of what's going on through hashtags. You can also build your audience using that. So again, start following. You can open up your account, start following certain people that you want to follow, or friends, certainly all your family, as I call them, which would be any board members, staff, that kind of thing. And with Twitter, you can also import a contact list to help build audience, and then you can choose who you might want to follow using the emails that they have to create their Twitter accounts. Hashtags, I hope everybody here knows, but hashtags are a way to find trends, posts that are hashtag. You can search out those across different platforms. And for our work, I often use nonprofit or donors or whatever hashtags might be relevant to what you're doing. And that helps people who are looking for that kind of information to easily find your tweets. If you're tweeting a lot, that's excellent. If you're tweeting less often, then it might not be as useful. But we use this really to great benefit when we were at College Success Foundation to build our to carefully build our audience. On Twitter, it's about being really active and interactive, commenting, posting different information. Now you can comment on different tweets instead of just a straight retweet. Excuse me. And Twitter's thinking about extending beyond the 160 character count. So think about that as needing perhaps more resource than you might have done. And scheduling out on Twitter can happen because it's if you dedicate a certain chunk of your day, you're going to just have a straight stream of tweets for 20 minutes in a row to get your information and to share. But it does need a little more attention, I would say, to interact than Facebook to make it good. And again, just like all the social media platforms right now, images are going to increase engagement. A lot of people are using, you've probably seen quotes over images and using those, which you also see on sites like Instagram. So here's one that I liked. It was one campaign. They had a great, friendly picture on the front that they also did a little bit of an overlay on. They have their logo as their avatar. They've got a good number of followers, but not very many that they're following. And that follower to following ratio, keeping the following low and the followers high, can increase your score in Twitter land, I suppose. And what else on here? They've got their link. They tell when they joined. It's all good. So I really liked what they did. There are tons of great nonprofits out there using Twitter. So getting started on LinkedIn. So a lot of us might have a LinkedIn. I hope you have a LinkedIn account, but we might not have one for our nonprofits. You might think about that. It's a good way to start to build a different kind of network, and it'd be a little more business/professional network. It's a way to put yourself out there in the kind of business mode. I would say LinkedIn isn't quite as interactive. You can post every once in a while. You can post longer, thoughtful articles, and also makes a good connection, which can be very, very helpful to see those webs of connections when you're looking to work with board members to bring on new board members, when you're thinking about donors and connections through them. It's really great. So start by connecting with your family. So that would be your board members, your staff. You can take the longer content that you've actually published maybe in your newsletter. You don't have to shorten it as much as you do when you're using Twitter and Facebook and other platforms. You do use images still on images still on LinkedIn, but you actually can think about using potentially a little bit different images, which is kind of nice, or creating a collage. And I would encourage everyone to think about looking into the showcase pages. Showcase pages are used in business and nonprofit, and you can showcase projects. So a place like Microsoft is going to show their different platforms like Outlook and PowerPoint and things like that, how to use them. They have that, and there'll be a separate subpage. And you can use that, which would be really great, especially if you're doing something like a specific campaign, a capital campaign, etc. And I encourage you to update your own profile. Excuse me. I know sometimes we only do that when we're looking for jobs, which is a real pity, but I encourage nonprofit professionals to create a profile that looks really welcoming and also looks like they're very, very happy in their jobs and what they're doing. It's just as great when people are going to have a meeting with you and they Google you to find a little bit more, and they can see that super information. And if you need to help your leadership, your spokespeople, the top frontline folks who are doing the work in your organization, to also update their information and have it look, doesn't have to look shiny and new, but it needs to look approachable, explain who you are, and certainly not look like you opened your account 5 years ago and haven't done anything since. here's one, the Down Syndrome Research Foundation here in Canada, that I really liked what they did. It's simple. They don't have a ton of posts, but in this case they are talking about who's in the BMO Marathon. And one thing I love about LinkedIn is you can use this to really thank other corporations, foundations, by thanking them. So if they've done some volunteer work as a group, maybe on Martin Luther King Day, or, oh, that's for U.S. people, or another kind of day, it's a way to strengthen those corporate relationships. So I'm just going to pause and see if anybody's got any, I guess, are there any questions? You know, I can't see the questions, Shannon. I'm so sorry, but we're all good?
Sorry. Sorry about that, Beth. I was muting myself so I could listen to all your good stuff here.
No, that's okay. Great. Well, now I'm going to just start talking about how we build community.
Before you do that, you know, going back, Florence said, what's the average age, if you have them, of the users you were showing in the social media graph? So do you have that info?
I have it as a link at the end.
Okay, great.
So there's I will just say you can really do a deep dive into this information. So the Pew Research, which I have a link to, their study that they did, goes deep down into age, education, gender, a lot of different things, and also active users versus people with just that have accounts. So that 2-year period that they were looking at has a lot of information. And so I didn't go into it here because I wasn't sure how deep it wanted to go, but it's a great way. If you're perhaps doing something, say, around breast cancer, and you think you want something that appeals a little bit more to women, there are definitely men who care about breast cancer too, but you know, Pinterest could be a better way for you to go, where you can pin information that's useful for people who are experiencing breast cancer, people who care for people with breast cancer, etc. So yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And again, Florence and anyone else, there's a number of resources and PDFs that Beth links to that you will have, that she includes in the slides. So when you download the recording or you download the slides, that will come to you in email after the webinar is over. You can go ahead and click on those to get more information. Marcella asked, what exactly is meant by having a list of Facebook friends? She said, we can't solicit them with newsletters or email legally if they didn't sign up from info from us, correct?
Right.
Yep.
So did you, going back to the Best Friends Animal Society, if you, and if you're on the, of course I want you to pay attention to me, but if you're at a computer, you could go in and look. If you go in and click on that, and now I've forgotten what it says. It says something like stay in touch, I think. And if you click on that, you can see that you can fill out mailing information. So an email address, the first name, last name, and your zip code. I could go onto my Google and take a look at that, but you might want to explore that and see if that is another way to capture names. So I hope that answers.
Yeah, and I mean, and you're right, Marcella. There is a double opt-in that has to happen for you if people are joining your newsletter list or any type of list. If you don't have an opt-in where that person says, yes, I agree to be on this list, I wanted to be on this list, and then you solicit them, then yeah, you are breaking sort of, federal communication laws, and that's both in the States as well as in Canada. So you just want to make sure that you have that opt-in, which most of us do, because it's impossible, right, sort of to sign up for an email marketing software that doesn't have that as part of your ad to when people are adding to your newsletter list or adding themselves to your newsletter list. And
so what I would do is actually just have a kind of welcome email /series for those people that would use images that's across your banner so that they recall very clearly when they signed up, and I would change that when you change the banner on your Facebook page, and then just ask them to feed in through what you're doing, in the usual way.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
Yeah.
And this is the same thing. So for those of you, Marcella says, there's the same thing with you're going to import emails from Twitter. Anytime you import any information, you have to make sure that you send them an opt-in to your newsletter so that they can say yes to that. Otherwise, you should not be talking to them via email. So.
Oh, yeah, just to be clear, the import was um, if you had a contact list for nonprofit A, you would then import into Twitter to see if any of those people have an account. So you would just be following them.
Got it.
So in Twitter, what happens? So Facebook is it's sort of bilateral, so to speak. That is, if Shannon and I are friends, and I decide not to be friends with Shannon anymore on Facebook, that's it. She can't. She could follow me. I guess she could. They have a new thing where you can follow somebody, but she would not have access to me anymore. Twitter, I can follow a bunch of people, and some of them won't follow me back, and some people follow me, and I won't follow them back. So Twitter is sort of unilateral, or bilateral. So I can follow, or they can follow.
That's great.
Or we can follow each other.
Right.
So just to be, and that's the same with things like Instagram. You know, I'd say the new way to do it is not the Facebook way, but where each party decides to follow the other or not.
Great. And one more question. There's actually a couple questions. One from Corinne, who had a question about being on Facebook, and right now they're not set up as a nonprofit organization. They're set up as a school, and you can only get the donate button on Facebook if you're categorized as a nonprofit. So she was wondering if there's any way that anyone's gotten around that. And I think part of that is right now, no. But I'm also going to, Corinne, email this off to our good friend John Hayden, who all he does is Facebook. And ask him to see if there is a workaround for sure for that. But I think right now, what I know, there isn't. And part of it is just knowing how you categorize yourself based on your audience. So whether you think it's the majority of donors that are there, then obviously maybe you want to be a nonprofit organization. But if you're a school, and that's where a lot of parents and students get their information about what's happening at your school, they're not necessarily, their first call to action isn't donate, then yeah, you want to stay as a school, because that's how people are going to find you, especially new people that want to learn more about your school.
You might want to start a page. Of course, this is going to take more time for you, but you might want to have your page that's called, Little Red Schoolhouse, and you have another one called Little Red Schoolhouse and Friends that is actually more about the social. So, we're going to have ours, school play. We're going to do that it's more about the community and not as much about the internal audience, especially related to the children. The Little Red Schoolhouse page might be about, parent-teacher conferences are now, or, when we're having early dismissal, and you don't necessarily want that kind of information out for the public to know.
Yeah, that's good. That's good.
So that might be a workaround, and then you would have that donate thing, and you could, invite people that are on your school to do it, but it's really more of a community lens on what the Little Red Schoolhouse is doing.
I like it.
Okay.
And one last question before you go on. Taylor says, if you only have the resources to manage one or two platforms well, how should they pick which ones are best to engage?
If only it were that easy.
It's a great question, yeah.
It is. Well, I'd say that because a lot of nonprofits are on Facebook, and a lot of older people are on Facebook, and some younger people are on Facebook, I definitely think Facebook is a useful one to be on. A lot of people know how to use Facebook. A lot of people don't get how to use, certain segments of the population may not get how to use Twitter, for instance. But let's say you have, a wide-ranging audience. You might find it really great to start up an Instagram account because you want to share different kinds of information, and you're going to be appealing to a different kind of audience. At the links at the end, you can take a look at what audiences are using which platforms, and I think that could help you think about that as well. It's better to start slow, so I would say get on one platform, spend 6 months on that. I know it's fun to want to hurry and get on a whole bunch of stuff. Do that well, start to do that and get it under your belt, the rhythm that you want to have with that, and then add a second platform. That's what I would suggest. So I'm going to get going because I'm a little behind here, and I have to be respectful of people's time. So posting and scheduling. So there's a lot of information about posting and scheduling. Most of the applications you post and it's in real time, although some allow you to delay posts like Facebook. However, a lot of times you have to use a third-party app to schedule posting. In a perfect world, you'd have someone just dedicated to social media who could be in all the time, who could be, checking here, checking there. When you can't do that, I suggest you set up notifications that help you stay on top of that, so you can find out when somebody's tweeted at you, when they've mentioned your organization, for instance. I would create expectations around what you can do with the capacity you have now. Even if you're thinking of hiring or growing later, I would do them around now, because you're going to want to set your measurements about what you can do now, and you want to be successful in those. If you've got a communications plan, I think you probably do, hopefully, then you have an editorial calendar, and you can also look at things like, when are we going to have that walk? When are we going to have the pumpkin run? When are we going to do this and that? And you can prepare yourself to have images for that, or bring in images from last year to get people ready for what's going to happen this year. So it's a good way to start thinking about how you can fill in information and content that's important to you. You may have stories that are coming up. Maybe you do a clothing drive every year. You can also schedule those out so that you have the tweets scheduled, tweets or posts or whatever you're doing. The great thing about scheduling, it does allow you to drip out the content, because a lot of times we can't just sit in front of our desk and just do social media. I mentioned third-party apps. I've used both Buffer and Hootsuite. Hootsuite I really like. It's up here in Canada. And they also allow you to have different members of your team manage accounts. One thing we want to be careful about is if we have our own personal Twitter account and we have one for our organization, that we're always posting to the right account. This can sometimes be a problem. Just Google the Red Cross and see what happened there. So, and remember that you want to have a call to action in your post or your tweet. Sometimes you're just having an interaction with someone, answering questions, having a laugh with them about something that they came to, some concert you did, etc., food drive. But really you're going to be wanting to have a call to action to get them involved, engaged, and many times it's going to be to drive to your website where you have more information. Best times to post. Again, I've got a link, deep dive on that. There's like some serious time spent on figuring out when people post. I have an overview from different organizations and what they said were the best times to post, but I also will encourage you after 3 months to start looking at who is on your social media platform or platforms, when are they active, and then keep doing that, I would say quarterly, until you build up to about, I don't know, with Twitter I'd say probably 2,000 followers. With Facebook, maybe when you get 1,000 fans or friends, you want to start having some traction, because as it grows, it will change. So just to cut a little bit of information for you guys to see, I did cut the Facebook, Twitter, and LinkedIn. So this shows you information that was gathered from multiple sources, that these are the higher engagement times, shows that posting at 3 p.m. Will be better, etc., etc. I've got that for Twitter as well. And then here's LinkedIn. A couple little tips. So the longer infographic of that, I have a link at the end in the resources. So taking it social. So one thing that happens is when you're using something like Hootsuite or Buffer is you can post to multiple platforms at one time. And then you get this kind of look. It's kind of ugly, where you're just pushing everything to your Facebook page. And it doesn't look interactive. Because it's a long post, it's ended up with this ... because there are only so many characters you can have here. It just doesn't look, doesn't look authentic. I know it makes it super easy, but it just doesn't make it real and engaging. And so this was College Success Foundation, where I used to work, and we worked so hard building up our Twitter account. And this, I was really surprised, are the updates from Charity Water. Charity Water only has updates related to who they're hiring. I found it really, really super uninspiring. However, they do a really good job in a lot of ways on other platforms. So creating content. So I'm just going to walk you through how I might take information and create 3 posts out of it. So in my last job, I worked in East Africa. One of our partners was Room to Read, which was much better at storytelling. So let's say we've got this. This came off a sheet from Room to Read. It talks about Tanzania. It talks about some of the information. And here's more information about literacy rate and the libraries we've done. So taking all this information and looking at it, and of course you probably would have even made it into a better story. Here's what I thought I might pull out for a Facebook post. This little sentence, or two sentences. I looked for an image. Now, I pulled images from when I'd been in East Africa, so these are not the fanciest images in the world. Really, we only had, we did send out photographers sometimes to East Africa, but we just used our own for our work that we needed. When you're thinking about images, I also have another link to the 2016. It lists all the different sizes, the widths, the lengths, everything you need for different parts of social media. Super useful. So here's the image I was going to use. It kind of mostly has girls. There's actually some boys in here too, but I'm using it as what I want to use for this post that I'm creating. So just talking quickly about images, a lot of information on the web about this, but use authentic images whenever possible. I know stock looks so pretty, but it doesn't feel real most of the time. And the most annoying thing is when you've found this great stock image for your nonprofit and then you find it somewhere else on the web with a similar nonprofit. Very, very disappointing. Keep your imagery as powerful as you can. And remember that, remember that the difference between positive and negative images, Jeff and Tom talked about that. So the sad, quote-unquote, sad images do get higher response rate, higher donation rate. So the dog that's still out as the feral dog that needs to be brought into the shelter, the child that is still needing to be fed, those will get higher engagement many times. But you want to manage overall the negative and positive images that you're presenting on your social media platform. If you have presence of mind and you can consider the composition when you're shooting a picture or filming something, great, yay. If not, you can try to adjust that when you come back. And I also saw a tip about using, you can also use a certain kind of filter whenever you're working, and it kind of sort of brands your posts to your nonprofit. You can adjust composition so they fit in those social media size with things like Canva and Pablo. So, and watch your resolution. So here's what I used on, I brought up Pablo. Pablo's related to Buffer. It's purchased by Buffler. So you can bring up an image and then it'll ask you here, are you looking for something wide, something narrow, or something square? So it will take your image and it will create it like that. I chose wide. Here's Canva. I used, I think, a square one for this. And then here's how I made my finished post. I have a little bit of that information I gathered that I thought was powerful. I put a link to where they could donate. That's an actual, link back to the website. Could be a link to picture, a page of people working in the program, etc. Here's how I thought about it and conceived it for a tweet. Again, you have a lot less to work with in terms of characters. I named Room to Read. They're one of our partners. If I was still working at AKU, I would have put that in there. I have a picture of a bunch of boys here. I haven't focused on the Learning for Girls, and I've put a link to Room to Read there. And then here on LinkedIn, I don't have the whole thing, but I actually repurposed some of the information and made it to a narration and talked about meeting goal and thanking donors. That's how I use this. You can't see that. But what I want you to know is there's a banner image. It lists your information, whoever you are posting that. And then you get a headline and then the text is below and you're able to put another image below it, a different image as well. So I'm just going to pause for a minute and see if anybody has questions before I get into this next little bit. See if Shannon can read any questions to me. Otherwise, I'll just assume there are none. I don't know why I can't read the questions for some reason. Okay. Well, I'm going to talk to you a little bit about thought leadership. So when we were working at College Success Foundation, instead of wanting to bring just a lot of people together, we had scholars, people on scholarships that we worked with a lot. We decided we wanted to be the respected smarty in the space. So what we did is we used Twitter as our platform. We already had a Facebook page, but it was, again, kind of a dog's breakfast. Using strategic use of hashtags, so we used higher ed. It's great to get a hashtag sheet to see what ones are useful in your nonprofit space. You can also start following different organizations and see which hashtags they're using. And what we used to do is go on and on different hashtags and start following organizations and government officials that we respected around that. We then retweeted certain people, certain information. We commented on that kind of information, which at that time you did by adding, by curating the tweet and adding a comment at the front on a retweet. Now you have a little more flexibility on that. We were highly interactive and responsive to anybody who tweeted to us, especially around reporters, government officials, that was local or national. We shared our own successes and successes of organizations that were similar to ours. So we were working with low-income students and students of color to get them into college and to college completion, which if you're in that space, you know, is a challenge, and also getting foster kids scholarships. So we talked about what we were doing, and that also generated a lot of interest and a lot new follows. We also talked about our partners. So we had partners like the Gates Foundation. We had partners in school districts. We talked about them and encouraged interaction with them. We also signed up for this great thing called HARO, which is called Help a Reporter Out. And it's a great way for you to talk about your nonprofit, the work you do, and put it out there that you'd be willing to talk to a reporter who's looking for information. So a lot of times, especially local reporters, are on a tight deadline, and they want to get some information from, you know, someone doing college scholarships because, you know, the state is closing or lessening the scholarship money that they're offering, say. We put ourselves out that we would be working, talking about scholarships, talking about college completion, encouraging middle school students to get to college. We had all this information where we were willing to talk to reporters, and reporters, mostly local reporters, started contacting us. We became really known as successful and respected in this space. Our president began to be called upon to comment on certain things. In this case, we also used a lot of measurable results. So reporters like to have those measures. I know in our storytelling we talk about how that's not as useful, but it is something that reporters like to have because it's factual and it's the kind of thing they can talk about and report on. If you're going to do this thought leadership, which worked really well for us, because within 12 months we had the New York Times, which was sort of one of our reach organizations, call us seeking comment for higher ed information on low-income students and students of color in higher ed. So it was really, really great to be quoted by them. If you're going to do this and you're having more than one platform, it'll be really necessary that you keep one platform to build your thought leadership and another one to build sort of a more general audience. So tips for the small shop. Just checking if there are any other questions, if Shannon has any that she wants to share.
So real quick, there was one that came in, and it was, should you ask a question in your Facebook post to try and elicit responses? And what about the use of humor? So how do you feel about both those things?
Yeah. So I'm going to talk about questions, which actually ending something with a question mark really increases engagement. So yes, that's coming up in here. It's great because it asks for you to engage with somebody, and that can be either on Twitter, Facebook. A lot of times it's sort of a what do you think, or share what you've experienced, that kind of elicitation of a response. And then humor really works. It's one of those humanizing things. I'm working on trying to get one of our Facebook pages for AFP to be a little better, and I'm using humor on Fridays for that exact thing. people like it. They think of Friday as being that kind of day right before the weekend that it's kind of good to be funny. So yes, it's really human. And before I send this off, I'll link a couple really cute, cute humorous posts that I found. But John Hayden on Facebook had some one about dogs that kind of was a dog's nose with a lot of those little balls that you put on Christmas cookies. Like he put his nose in the jar of those, and it's just very real. And you've perhaps seen dogs get into trouble that way before. So yes, those do work. You just need to make sure the humor is appropriate for your group. So small shop tips. So if you're the only person there, if you're one that's handling all the comms, then you really want to create, as we talked about before, great relationships with those colleagues who will hear and see the stories and feed them into you. A good thing to do is to track stories, which you could either do with Evernote, or you could just have a running, even a running Word document that lists the stories, or a spreadsheet, as they come up as ideas and as you might want to do them going forward. And then collate where the images are, either hopefully by their name, their file name, so that you can easily know where to reach for them. There's nothing worse than knowing you saw a really great picture and you can't find it. You can actually set copy photos into a subdirectory that would just be either for social media or something like that, and then you would always be able to have them, and it's a little bit easier to look at. Track those stories of donors too. So you know, talk about the person who gave the clothing drive, talk about someone who made an unusual gift or made a bequest. All that is really great to include because it's part of the whole health of your organization. And don't be afraid of taking a selfie. You know, it's fun to see people in a pose that you know you see all the time. So doing that with a major donor can be really fun, or with somebody that's just finished the fun run or something like that. When you're saving pictures, when you're downloading them off your disk or off your phone or however you did it, you know, it's really great to take a few minutes, clean them up, get rid of the ones that aren't useful, and maybe even do a little bit of editing and add some keywords. That way when you're going back to find them, it seems like you'll be able to find them after a year, but you know, some nonprofit electronic files are not the best organized, and you want to be able to get things as quickly as possible, especially in a small shop. In your story file, you could also say, grab picture from fun run with pumpkin child in pumpkin costume or something, just to jog your mind. You should, again, I hope you all have an editorial plan of some sort, but on that, when you're noting key dates, projects, you can transfer all that information onto where you're keeping your social media stories or ideas for stories. You know, the best thing is to be conversational and be real, and when you're thinking about how you're putting an image out there on your platform, you want to mix posts up. So especially on something like Facebook, where people can scroll through very easily to see, you know, the posts for the last year or the last month or something like that. You don't want everyone to be just about your dog food drive. You want to have something about what fun it is, and you know, maybe what it's like to work at the kennel. You really want to have different kinds of lenses for your friends to take a look and see what it's like to be part of you. Because really what you want when they're sharing, when they're liking, when they're interacting with you, is they're saying, you're just like me, I want to be part of that tribe. Do posts that end with a question mark get twice as many likes, comments, and shares? Well, yes, they do. So there's your question mark. So yes, ask people. Now, don't be disappointed if you don't get a lot of those to begin with. When we worked with Parkinson's to do that, one thing we did is we did 30 days during the month of Parkinson's, 30 days of tips to live better with Parkinson's. And we didn't use images of Parkinson's people. We used images of the outdoors. If the tip was about being calm, if it was about getting outside and moving more, we had a kid playing. We didn't worry about making sure it looked like a Parkinson's person with Parkinson's, I'm so sorry, because people look all different ways, and in fact moving it away from sort of that idea of what an older person looks like who may have Parkinson's, it really kind of opened it up. And as we went through this month, when we were trying to get more engagement and get people to see our Facebook page as something useful, we got more and more likes and interactions afterwards. So remember, platforms with heavy streams like Twitter, you can post very, very similar content over and over again, because the people who are on at 1 are not going to be the same people who are on at 5 and not the same people who are going to be on at 11 p.m. So just some quick tips by platform. Facebook posts consistently, because people like to know they can always come back and see information if they missed it. Vary your posts with images, videos, and text. Have links. Just make sure they all look a little bit different, although you know that images are going to perform better. Remember, this is really personal site, so keep the banter light, like say compared to LinkedIn. With Twitter, use action words in your tweets. Be very conversational. Do some back and forth. Participate in discussions. Thank people. Sometimes you can thank people for following, but that can get a little bit long. You can thank people for donating. You can thank people for participating in this or that, like the fun around the community things. And use hashtags, although 1 or 2 per tweet is usually enough to draw new audiences in. With LinkedIn, you want to be relevant. You want to be thinking business when you're doing posts on LinkedIn, so thinking more of the business side, the professional side, and demonstrate your smarts. This is where you can have more information about your impacts, how you got to them, things like that. On Instagram, tips are balance consistency and quality. You know, it's really hard to have high quality images, and that's what Instagram is all about. But work hard, use filters, take things that look everyday, crop more, that you might have a more interesting perspective when you do that. Don't fear the selfie. You know, if it's with, I don't know, maybe it's a clothing drive and you take a picture of somebody in a pile of coats. I mean, something fun and playful like that is going to draw a lot of attention, and people want to interact with that. So in Instagram for nonprofits, compelling images are really great, but so are those featuring your beneficiaries or staff, because it keeps it real. In Google+, and there are a lot of people on Google+, although it's not as used for nonprofits, you know, you can make your posts stand out with bold headlines. You can use a lot of formatting. Unlike other posts, you can use a lot of formatting in what you say, so underlines, italics, etc., and use hashtags. Pinterest, you want to create niche boards. So if you're working at Fred Hutchinson Cancer, you might have a board for different, I was going to say types of cancers, but people supporting different research areas might be something. Thinking about something like Children's Hospital in Seattle, you might want to have each different guilds. Well, they probably have their own, but you would have something quite narrow so that people can be like, okay, I'm going to look at how am I going to knit blankets for dogs for the kennel, or how are we going to have, what's the best way to do flashcards if you're doing an early learning? How can I make flashcards at home to help my kids learn? You want to have vertical images in Pinterest, and you want to use short descriptions and use hashtags. And then Vine and other videos, which are really great and fun, try to keep your videos level, and like Vine has a leveling tool, so you can tell when you're going all wonky. And then you have an opportunity to tidy up the clip in the app, which is really useful because you can do it right there and just clip out the weird beginning or take out the end that you don't really like, or it makes it too long. Might be worth investing in a tripod. You can do quick interviews, you can thank people, you can say hello with that kind of thing. And then if you really want to get creative, and there's a lot of creativity out there with things like Vine, is you can try doing something stop action. So I'll quickly hit the measurement. We're at the 1 hour mark, so I apologize for people who are wanting to get away or have something going. I'm really going to hit this quickly because you actually can find a lot of information about how to measure. But what I will say is, when you're starting, you want to just have very basic goals. Number of posts, number of tweets, the quality of your shares. You know, are they, like with College Success Foundation, are we getting shares from other organizations, from government officials? Consider that what your short-term goals are and work to those, and have some long-term goals for farther out. but keep things reasonable. You can measure things like how many people do I have signing up for our newsletters. I can measure website traffic coming from our social media. We can measure gifts that came in from social media or new volunteers. There's a lot of different things you can measure, and it can get super deep. A simple tool like Google Analytics can help you. Visits, subscriptions, types of users. Honestly, when you Google this, it can be quite overwhelming. When you do that, I would look for something that that is useful from like the last couple years. Kind of raced through, so I apologize, but I will say.
Well done.
Any other questions?
Yeah, so I went ahead and nothing has come in yet, but I'm gonna scroll back to make sure I haven't missed anything. But and I just let everybody know, for those of you that need to run off and do some work, that's absolutely okay. Beth is gonna stay on for a few minutes just to answer any lingering questions for you. So feel free to put those in the questions box if you have more questions. The recording and slides will be made available to you. They will go into your storytelling conference video account. We'll also send out a link afterwards so that you make sure you can find them. So I'm just getting somebody that said, thanks for all the information. Have a great day.
Yeah, it's a lot of information, sorry.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I mean, part of social media is understanding, it's not as if it's direct mail where there's a science to one channel. I mean, with social media, you've got science for, 6 to 8 channels, new channels, like you mentioned earlier on Periscope. That's brand new. People are starting to use it. I mean, really, the information is endless in terms of platforms and what you should be doing out there. So.
And when you're searching for information, I would say look for information now that's from 2014, 2015. You know, there's a lot of information back in 2011, but things have really changed since then. So when you're doing your own search for what would be good metrics or how can I, do better posts, look for things that are more recent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's a really great tip. Go ahead and bring up that slide that has your PDF resources too, Beth, just so people can see it.
Yeah.
So don't try to write all this down or take a screenshot. What's going to happen is you'll get access to the slides, and those will be clickable links where you can go ahead and find out more information. So that's great. I'm not seeing any other questions come in, but I'm going to leave it for about another minute. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them now. Beth is here to answer them. Or Beth, if you, and I know Beth will say this, but if you think of something after the webinar, or you're just kind of have a little brain, I don't know, like spark, and you're like, oh, I wonder what this is. Beth Ann left her email there for you because she is really great and loves to respond to questions. So if you have a question after the fact, feel free to email her at bethann.lock@gmail.com. So great information, getting a lot of kudos over here, Beth, but I'm not seeing any other questions come in. Okay. So I think we will just call it for the day. Thank you, Beth Ann, for a great presentation.
Thank you, guys. Thanks for coming out.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, feel free to email Chris or me or Beth Ann, all that good stuff. And we miss you guys. We've missed you since November. Hope you're having a really great start to the new year, and hope to see you in Chicago later this year. Oh my gosh, it's already that time. So have a great week, everyone.
Take care. Bye-bye.